everybody, I'm Trellis Usher, and you're watching PAX 8 Live.
It's a great atmosphere and it's very cozy, despite the fact that there are 1,700 people around you.
This is where we show you the future. You guys want to see the future?
I'm really excited about bringing Beyond to Europe.
I think the most important element that sets PAX 8 Beyond apart from other events is that we really place the MSP at the core of this event.
It's all about the business of an MSP, and it just shows that PAX 8 really understand what partners need.
So Beyond really focuses on 3 pillars: our education, our innovation, and our community.
In Norway, we basically don't have any MSP community at all, so going to an event like this is super useful.
I think it's going to be a phenomenal opportunity for everybody in the MSP community.
And I think it's just going to be symbolic of PAX 8 just expanding across the globe, but honoring the regions and what makes them unique.
I think what PAX 8 are doing for the partners is just unbelievable.
You want a little more? Okay, because we're not done.
Digital transformations are changing our view of what's possible, what we can accomplish, and how far we can go. In the PAX 8 marketplace of the future, AI helps illuminate new opportunities, and your whole portfolio is within reach. You can go to market faster, work more efficiently, and accelerate your success, all with an intuitive interface designed to scale as you scale. Infinite growth is possible in the new PAX 8 marketplace.
What's up, everyone? Happy Wednesday, and welcome to the game on PAX 8 Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of. We have a great show for you today. No guests, but we're going to spend some time diving into CIS 8.1, do a little comparison to 8.0, and I don't know, maybe understand what is governance, what are the asset classes, what is an asset, and we'll see where our journey takes us from there. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. If you want to interact with us, the best place to do that is youtube.com/PAX8Cloud. That is the main streaming site of this show, and our production team can actually see the comments and put them up on screen so we can make you famous as well. Don't forget to sign up for PAX 8 Beyond. We've got Beyond Berlin coming up, but we also have US Beyond. I believe it's already 50% sold out, so don't forget to do that. And if you haven't registered for Security Bootcamp, I think you're going to have a lot of fun. It's in Phoenix next month. And we've got something a little special planned, so you might want to look into that. Let's jump into the show. What's up, Matt?
Man, it's good to see you, Dom. How are you, buddy?
I'm all right. You know, it's Q4. It's a busy time, but it's good.
Yep, playing budget heck, I hear, for the last couple weeks for you, so that's always fun.
Yeah.
You know, I've been wanting to do this show for a while, man. This came out in late June or so. I just haven't had any time to really dissect and break this down. And so hopefully this is a fun little journey for anybody watching today. We're going to be talking about, you know, CIS Critical Security Controls version 8.1, which we're going to see as a bit of an iterative improvement upon 8 and shouldn't be all that shocking. So if you don't watch the rest of the show, not that I'm advocating for it, TLDR, not a massive difference in 8.1. But it's very helpful to think how they're thinking and how it applies. So I'm excited for that. All right. Well, my thoughts are we'll just get straight to Robin Harris. I can tell I'm quite tired, so I apologize, y'all, for my lack of energy here. But we'll get to Robin Harris's brilliant words, and then we'll come back and start picking apart some of the differences in 8.1. Stick around and look forward to seeing y'all. And happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month, y'all. It's October. It's the 1 month a year we decide that security matters. So I'm excited to talk about CIS.
About 30 more days. Let's make it count.
That's it. Yeah, and 30 more Roddy Bergeron memes, right? So it's going to be awesome. All right, let's catch Robin Harris. Thank y'all so much.
Are you ready?
Cybersecurity Month, October, has focused on a theme about securing our world. And this is interesting because at one point, security was something you talked about at work, and it was a work thing. But with the way technology is going and AI and the bad guys becoming much more creative and innovative in their scams, everybody has to think about cybersecurity. And I know it's become a common household thing when my husband comes home and tells me, "Did you hear about the Amazon scam?" Let me tell you what's going on. People are getting packages, and Amazon is at my house every other day. But the box comes, you pick it up, you put it in your house, you open it, and it's empty. And it's like, oh, but there's a QR code in the box. When you scan that QR code with your phone, they've got you all the data. You've just handed over your whole phone's data to the bad guys. That's pretty creative, don't you think? I mean, can you imagine grandma, your mother, sisters, kids? They're not gonna necessarily be thinking that this is not from Amazon. So the point that I'm trying to make is securing our world is no longer just about securing our work environment. And so when we take this opportunity to actually really help employees and our staff understand that security is not a 9-to-5 thing, it's not an office thing, it's a thing we have to extend throughout our whole life, with our families, with our businesses, with our colleagues, with our elders. Secure our world means that we have to be prepared for what's coming next. And I can tell you, securing our world, it's not going to get easier. It's going to get more difficult. And when we don't dial in the basics and start thinking security as a method of operating on a daily basis, at some point we're going to trip up. We're going to click the link. We're going to scan the QR code. We're going to give some information through social engineering. We're going to make a mistake. We've got to start getting people to think security, security, security. It's part of the new world. Let's secure our world.
Level up. Level up.
All right.
Man, that Amazon scam, I'm here for it. Like, that's well done.
Oh, for sure. Like, slow clap. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And really the trade craft in general of taking advantage of people in a certain time frame is getting easier. And easier to target too, right? I watched a talk at GERCON where they were talking about using LLMs to more hone and craft your phishing at a high level and high speed for a lot of different individuals. Basically, it's absorb Matt's LinkedIn profile, absorb Matt's YouTube, and tell me the best way that I might phish Matt, and then craft something to do that, right? And so getting much better at like contextualizing it and making it easier to attack. I would give one disagreement point with Robin, and I don't often disagree with her, mainly because she's meaner than me. But I don't often disagree. But she said, security is getting harder, and it's not going to get easier. I actually, for the most part, uncategorically disagree with that. I really believe something she said next, which was as we get into the basics and get better at the basics, really has an outpouring of how much that really does for us in security, right? That simple awareness of not clicking something, that simple suspicion or paranoia, if you will, that says, I'm not going to engage that. Or that simple thing that says, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? If they're offering one, it's probably not for real. And so I would just say that I think it's going to get easier over time, in my opinion, as it becomes more endemic. And to that
I don't
end,
think
I think
it's
we ought to
necessarily
kick off.
hard today because it really is about the basics. Like the majority of the damage is from a lack of basics, right? So I don't know that it's necessarily difficult. It might be a little complicated for some, but in general, we're just not even trying, right?
Yeah, agreed.
That's
Yeah,
my
agreed.
biggest challenge.
It was funny, Jason Street. And if you don't know Jason Street, you should follow him. He's amazing. Jayson, Jason Street. He did a talk at GrrCon, and it was actually called "Why You Don't Belong in This Community and in this hacking community in 30 minutes or less." And it was pretty salacious. But one of the things that he talked about is he starts screaming on stage, and one of his big things is he's very loud. I say that, so it must be louder than me. But he starts screaming on stage and saying, "We think AI is going to solve it. AI, the new MDR, that'll solve it. Or wait, IPS, no, IDS. Now we can prevent." And he basically was going off about how over the last 20 years of our life, we've just taken one hyperbolization after another to just avoid going, maybe I should make a list of my assets. Like at the end of the day, let's start with the basics. Yeah, perhaps. And I suppose to that end, let's cut over to my screen and I'm going to share CIS Critical Controls version 8.1. So 8.1 came out late June, and it does some modifications that speak exactly towards some of those basics in a broader definition, right, Dom? And one of the things that was the most critical, at least initially, was them trying to align with NIST CSF, and by that proxy, introducing the term governance. So Dom, just before we get going in this, in your mind, what is governance? Let's tackle that. What do you think governance is?
It's inspecting what you expect. Right, so we have technical controls, and we have policies and procedures, and we have detective controls. But when we really get into it, your policies are governance, right? But more importantly, the processes around enforcing those policies are governance, right? If you're not doing that, then it's not going to get done. Or if you're not expecting that, then the work's not going to get done.
It's not going to get done. Yeah, because other pressures will apply, and people will do what they do to serve your company. And I like to say that governance, in my mind, is the will of a company realized, right? To your point of inspecting what you expect, I'm saying, hey, make sure that you delete old data. And then I check to see if you have, right? It's like saying, son, do your homework, but never checking if he did his homework. You're not governing in that regard. You're just hoping that he's going to do his homework. And 9 times out of 10 doesn't. So CIS 8 was a pretty big deviation from 7 and a non-iterative change. It was a complete change, right? So 8.1, as they open it up, they start out by saying, what is 8.1? And I'm going to read this to everybody. I'm sorry I'm playing read it, but maybe you like to absorb it this way. CIS Controls version 8.1 is an iterative update to version 8. As part of our process to evolve the CIS controls, we established design principles that guide us through any minor or major updates to the document. Our design principles for this revision are context, clarity, and consistency. Context enhanced the scope and practical applicability of safeguards by incorporating specific examples and giving people contextual clues, right? Specific examples and additional explanations. Clarity aligns with other major security frameworks to extend the practical while preserving unique features of CIS controls. Consistency maintains continuity for existing CIS control users, meaning 8.0 and 8.1 aren't that delineable in that regard, and ensuring little to no change due to this update. Here are the broad changes we've made. We've updated CIS with new asset classes, which we're going to talk about, right? The specific parts of an infrastructure and the safeguard that they apply to. New classes require new definitions. We obviously added them. Coexistence. CIS is going to now look like NIST CSF, and mainly in the understanding of which asset classes are used, the type of classes that we're functioning on, and the understanding of governance and software to align with software instead of applications, things of that nature, just making sure they align. And consistency. Traditionally, any iterative update to CIS should minimize disruption to control users, right? 8.1 versus 8, and 9 would be a non-iterative change. Basically, the point is they've added in an alignment with NIST CSF. And NIST CSF 2.0 came out with and added governance, right? So that's kind of where that aligns.
Well, and we should point out that governance has been a part of security since security's been a thing, right? The problem is not a lot of people do governance, perform governance, unless they're forced to by some regulating body doing the governance for them, right? So that's your OCR enforcing HIPAA rate, although they don't really do that, but enforcing HIPAA regulations if they were to actually, do that. Or that is that is your FINRA regularly auditing and enforcing rules on brokers, right? So that's the traditional thought process of governance, but governance is just a function that's been here forever, and we're just acknowledging it, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. And I really liked this governance. To your point, we're just acknowledging it and really maybe codifying it even, Dom, right? Like before it was, well, of course they're doing that because we have a compliance program. No.
Right.
It doesn't mean that. It just means that we've hoped they are. And governance is really taking it to that next step of measuring it. The other thing I love called out in the beginning of 8.1 in the early body of this is the evolution of CIS controls. And it says the CIS controls started like many similar activities. We gathered experts together. They shared and argued. I wish they would put argued like 6 times in this, because there was a lot of arguing involved in a lot of these, right? Like a lot of opinions and a lot of tradecraft opinions and things. And it's really tough. In fact, any working group I've been involved in, it's hard for it not to spin into chaos. So if you've ever, participated in a working group, it's really hard not to have a bunch of opinions stop any production. So to their point, they reached an agreement. They said this can be very valuable depending on the people at the table and their experience, right? Which I'd agree. Through documenting and sharing the output, all enterprises can benefit from the work of people they cannot hire or even meet. Right? You can improve the outcome through selecting experts that represent a wide variety of knowledge and bringing consistency. I am happy to say that I get to be involved in the 9 and have been somewhat involved in 8.1 and bringing the small to mid-sized business and MSP flavor to this understanding. But I do like that CIS does bring those experts in. There are ongoing fights inside CIS of should we be more governed function or should we be super, super technical and maintaining its position kind of role. And I guess for anybody listening, that is the way I see CIS is, I like to say it is the how to NIST's what. And they've done a lot to realign those, right? This is now getting into super nerdy parts. Like instead of thou shalt have an identity management practice, it is something more like make a list of users, make a list of places they can authenticate, right? Understand where they are and what they use. So I do like that. So
strikes that
kind of
balance, like the governance flavor in CIS, and we're gonna go into this, is very much how. Right? It's very much specific guidance on how to govern specific things. And you can see it in the way they've added govern controls to certain safeguards. And there's still controls that don't have governance safeguards, right? Because they haven't found somewhere to put in a governance safeguard. So I don't think they're overdoing it. I do think those technical roots are still here.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a balance, right? Because you could go down to the brass tacks of governance. In fact, as we dig into CIS, the orange stuff in our graph that we'll show is all that governance and measurable compliance type things that we can see. As they go on in this, they say, one key improvement is mapping to the addition of governance security function. Effective governance provides the structure needed to steer a program towards achieving the enterprise's goals, right? The will of the company is what I like to say. The controls were designed to be comprehensive enough to protect and defend cybersecurity programs for any size enterprise while being prescriptive enough to ease implementation, right? The how to NIST's what in my mind. With the update of 8.1, governance topics are now specifically identified as recommendations that can be implemented to enhance the governance of a cybersecurity program. So if you're missing TLDR, what they've done is taken some things that would have been kind of odd ones that were kind of jammed in there and reclassified them as governance. And I can actually pull up a couple of those here in a minute, but basically we'll go to our visuals, go to, let's put this in, oh, wrong keyboard, excuse me. Goodness gracious. No, I'm just done. Okay, swear to God, I'm here. A great example of that, and this is our CIS guide. We did build this with CIS. We worked with Charity Otwell and Joshua Franklin, and Joshua and Charity own CIS Critical Controls. They're the ones that put them out. And so they worked with us for about 3 months early on before this was released to do some of this visualization work. One of the things that we found in there is that as we broke these visuals down, CIS started to see some patterns emerge where they've used a term that didn't make sense, or they've added a tool here when they didn't mean to, or things of that nature. And so if you look in a lot of these, anywhere we identified a process-oriented safeguard was one of the things that we as a group had to do, is say, this is probably more process than it is technical. Like this is significantly more like have a list, manage that list. We've either seen it shift to identify, like in the case of lists, 1.1, 2.1, 3.2, right, 5.1, some of those. And then the others have shifted to governance. So anywhere you see in our guide marked up with these red bars, they're typically going to become a govern function or an identify function, right? So essentially anytime you see ensure or things of that nature. So CIS has taken that, and as we go through controls 8.1, we look at how many of those shifted over to govern, right? So every one of these that shifted in the security function changes. By the way, these documents that I'm referencing, we'll put links in those down the road, but essentially it's all of the critical controls stuff that you can get from Center for Internet Security or CISSecurity.org. They have the guideline for what changed. They have the 8.1 guide, and they also have the asset class guide, which we're going to dig into here in just a minute. So govern, 3.1, when to govern, establish and maintain data, documented data management process, when to a govern. because that is a process in which we define where our data can exist, what kind of data is there, the sensitivity of it, the handling, data retention limits, all those things are discussed in 3.1 and asked as a governed function, right? And that pivoted off, if I remember correctly, from an identifier data, asset type 8.1, security function 8.1, what was the older? Identify. Yeah, so this switched over to identify. And if you're looking to figure that out, these are your columns. Column J in this form is your identify, protect, respond. These are what they used to be, and here's what they are now in D. So column D gives you your point that is what it is now, and column J is going to give you the function in V8 before that. You have no virtual shiftings of the IG1, 2, and 3s. Again, they said this is an iterative update, so they're not going to have changes of the version or the implementation groups. They didn't do any of that pivoting. But they did align this document in the bottom by security function changes, asset class methodology, asset class changes only, safeguard description changes, and then glossary updates where they had to change some words, right? So the description changes is what we'll see some, where there are what, I think it was like 27, 30 something, yeah, 40, 33 description changes where they added in certain words, removed certain things. And a great example, let's look at 5.6. I thought I saw. Give me just a second. Right. So, for example, use unique passwords for all enterprise assets. Best practice implementation includes at minimum character passwords. All that was in there. And in this case, I think J is the V8 versus 8.1. What did they change in that one? Excuse me. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Use unique passwords for enterprise assets. Best practice. They had initially just had it that way, but they actually break it down and go a little bit longer. So a lot of these were just small word changes, things where they had used something different than the way they used it in others in an effort to kind of just normalize it. So there's not a huge amount of difference in the safeguard description changes, but the asset class changes and the asset class methodology is probably one of the biggest functions that Lineage wants. So first is the changes to accommodate govern, the changes to accommodate switching from like application as a term to software in the asset classes. And they released another guide with this too that came out called the Guide to Asset Classes. In the initial one, there wasn't enough done to delineate different components. Although they spoke to some of them, they've really defined them. If you're looking in the main guide on page 11, I believe it is. Let's see, page, was it right? Is it 11? Page 8, totally wrong. Page 8, they have the asset class chart that comes in the main document, in the critical controls document. But if you switch over to this other asset class guide, they really break into how they created this. There's one thing that is missing in here that I still think needs to be dealt with from that perspective, which is in the software class. Dom, in your mind, software in this case is installed applications, but they reference APIs. At what point do we not see something missing here? Like, what's missing? Do you know what I'm after? And Giga brought this up in a chat earlier today, or Brandon Martinez, but what's still missing in this asset class list?
Cloud, software as a service, leased software.
Yeah, SASE. Yeah, SaaS, right? Talking about SaaS applications. And it was funny, Brandon Martinez, I'll give him a shout out. He reached out to me in a private chat earlier and he goes, I was just on a call with a client's client, so a MSP's client's implementation security practitioner that they were working with for compliance. And the person said, oh, CIS 8 and 8.1 do not apply to cloud. While I would say it's missing here, the same principles apply, right? An identity is an identity, and it must be managed. And a access control list is an access control list, and it must be managed in SaaS just as much as it would be in local. So it's kind of one of those desks where I'm sitting here drinking my coffee and saying assets apply to the cloud too. Prove me wrong, right? So anybody in the chat, if you want to pipe in about me being wrong on this one, I'd love to hear your argument.
It is an asset, right? Or rather a collection of assets typically, right? Like SharePoint to me is an asset, and Exchange is an asset. And they're tied into that identity asset, right? So I disagree that it doesn't apply to cloud, although it would be nice to see really further guidance or more prescriptive guidance around SaaS in particular, and sort of acknowledging that transfer of risk.
Yeah, 100%. They kind of touch on it, right? And if you look at it, we go back into enterprise assets. Remember in this classification, if we look at enterprise assets, that's going to be under devices. So they've started making classes, subclasses, and then subclasses of those, right? So they have a lot more organization in this. I think there's something like 30 different asset classes here. But in this case, they did some great charts that do say enterprise assets, physical, virtual, or cloud-based environments. So they do speak towards at least the physical assets being counted as if they were, ADD or virtual or something of that nature. And then can be connected remotely. Then they break them into desktops, workstations, laptops, tablets, smartphones, right? Portable and mobile. And all they've really done is just give you great visuals for words that already existed. And I can prove it to you, right? If we go look at the asset classes in 1.1, those asset classes, and I'll just read it kind of verbatim here, said, maybe I might be able to read verbatim. Can I zoom in? I can. Okay. Establish and maintain an accurate, detailed, up-to-date inventory of all enterprise assets with the potential to store or process data. End user devices, including portable and mobile. There's that P&M we just saw in the asset classes. Network devices, non-computing. Those are also here. Servers, ensure that the records are up to date, blah, blah, blah. Connected physically, virtually, remotely, and those within cloud environments. So they didn't restate all of that. This was already in 8.0. This is the exact language from 8.0. Right. So when you look at it, they've just made it easier for people to digest, in my opinion, right? This kind of asset class to help you understand it. They did get into IoT. They talk about ICS, smart screens, printers, physical security sensors, IT security sensors like ESP32 boards, if you happen to have deployed those and things like that, Arduinos, Raspberry Pis, any of those non-computing, although Raspberry Pi probably drifts back into the computing side of things from an end user device perspective, potentially. Removable media. Look how much they've defined here. CDs, Blu-ray discs. Fair. Touche. External hard drives, SD cards, tape backups, diskettes, USB drives, right? So you can tell they really did a good job, in my opinion, of broadening the understanding of the asset class. Now, if you're a practitioner, in my opinion, you probably already knew most of this stuff, right? You already understood what a removable media meant and all the different variances of it. They do get deeper, though, in software, because in my mind, obviously, the cloud applications would be applications, right? To your point, program or group of programs running on an OS. Yeah, they're running on an OS, just not my OS, right? Their examples include web, database, cloud-based, and mobile applications. So to that person that was saying in 8 that it doesn't apply, this is pretty much your definition here, right? Saying that applications considered software asset, examples include. I should also note that in our visual, if you ever see examples, they'll be in gray, right? So anytime they give exemplary language, we'll say things like this. We'll visually color that gray so that you can kind of identify that they didn't say this is the end all be all. This is more just a example of that so that you can have context. And it goes back to that context statement they made, right? They want people to have contextual awareness of what these controls mean, so they're going deeper into the context stuff. But they do call out OS, right? And that's a subset of software. And firmware. So now they're starting to talk about the actual OS to some extent of the IoT, the actual OS of the ICS things that are there, but also firmware that exists at the hardware level of my operating system, right? Or my physical device, if you will. So they go into defining those a little better.
Means your damn VoIP phones and your printers too, by the way. Hate VoIP phones, man.
100%.
Always 10-year-old.
just a little
almost
bit.
Almost said malware. Always 10-year-old firmware.
They also call out that enterprise assets contain software assets, and subsets of those are applications and operating systems. Again, this isn't like earth-shattering, but it is restating of, you got to update the applications and the OS and the firmware, right? They're really stating that those exist, and then also saying contained within libraries, services, and APIs. They are still very much focusing on, I have control of the asset, therefore I have control of the software, and therefore I have control of the applications. But a lot of these same premises still apply when you don't. When I'm consuming a SaaS application and I need to configure it, those would still apply. And you can look at some of the work like Nick Ross is doing with Cloud Capsule, right? Of trying to show those settings in a third-party platform. And then they get into what is data. Data is a collection of facts that can be examined, considered, and used for decision-making. Well, that's pretty broad. Although data may be physical, CIS primarily provides protections on digital. So they get into the different subsets. And this is, again, nothing earth-shattering, right? Sensitive data is being defined. It's physical or digital data stored, processed, or managed by an enterprise that must be kept private, accurate, reliable, and available. If released or destroyed in an unauthorized manner, it would cause harm to the enterprise and its customers. These impacts may be due to a data breach or a violation of policy, contract, or regulation. I love this definition because they're really giving you, really, and they say in the earlier ones in 3, they say define sensitive data. You as a company have to decide. This is pretty clear. If it's going to hurt me, if it's released.
Literally today, because I got to be on the stakeholder group internally here at PAX8 for a huge update to our data classification standards. Just a lot has happened in a year, right? So it just came out today. And And I want everyone to understand that that policy is like 18 pages long. Now, we're a huge organization with a lot of moving parts, but it's very detailed, and it's very detailed on purpose so that we as stakeholders understand exactly what we're dealing with, and that our trust and security team can make really smart decisions based on really detailed classes of data, right? So when we speak about sensitive data, you in almost every case need to get 3 or 4 layers deep to really understand what you're dealing with, so that legal can understand the ramifications of you know, it being screwed up, and your security team can understand how they need to protect that and what controls apply to it. So it's data is a really deep conversation.
Yeah, and the more sophisticated your organization, the more sophisticated the data classifications will be within that subset of sensitive data, right? To your point, like if it has this but not that, it's not sensitive, but it's in this place, then it's sensitive, and it has these things, then it's sensitive. You've got to accommodate forces like GDPR and other things that help you define what those things are from a privacy perspective.
Well, and there's some interesting, like, and PaxAid's pretty unique, but I would bet a lot of our partners have at least one customer that's like analyzing data, right? So the difference between data that's had something like k-anonymity applied to it and can be used to research rather safely, versus if we're doing analysis on your partner information, right? Those are two very different conversations to have, and there's two different sort of levels of privilege required to work with that data.
Yeah, and to your point, anonymization and removing some of the detriment of using that data can be a very sound strategy, right? Of saying, I'll just anonymize this data, so at least if it's lost only in its macro, and that maybe not be in the same level of certainly privacy, but maybe even sensitivity. They go on to define log data, right, as a computer-generated data file. So a lot of this, if I had to like kind of TLDR what is 8.1, it's really just context awareness and better definitions, better wording, better understanding for practitioners. They go into physical data. They talk about physical data being removable types, including USB, which is interesting because that's also somewhat digital data in that definition, but fair. It's physically possessable, but so is a computer.
So actually, that's an
hairs.
interesting question, because the USB drive in particular, or tape backup, or Blu-ray, I don't really care. The possession of it, right, or the having it available is always a policy question. And I've tackled 10 or 15 different company policies in my career that they literally got in a debate of like, is this even allowed on the premises? So it's interesting that they're calling it physical data, right? Because whatever's on it is digital, right? But
it's digital, yeah, and possession based, but so is my laptop, so is my desktop. And I think maybe the only thing I could put together in this, other than encryption being notwithstanding, is that physical data is in itself not operating system dependent to access the data, right? Blu-ray, USB drives. Like in my computer, you would have to get through an operating system gatekeeping before one could look at that data. So I guess maybe I make an argument that I agree, but I also don't. But I get what they're trying to solve here. That's probably something that could use some work. All right, then users. Wait, users are assets? No way. This is blowing my mind right now. This is crazy. Yeah, they do break out users are employees, third-party vendors, contractors, service providers, consultants, or any other person who is authorized to access an enterprise asset. What is an asset again? Something that stores or processes data. So therefore, if you are authorized to hold this flash drive, then you're now a user,
You're a user
by that definition. Yeah. Are there subsets?
If your
Yes.
HVAC
In this
system interfaces with my PCI network, you're a user. Just saying.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. That's data, and it's a type of data that is sensitive. They go into workforce.
It's got to be in like
just so you
college
know,
professor textbooks by now, by the way. That exact case study has got to be the cornerstone of why we segment.
Yeah, for sure. You mean the and anybody bonus points if you know who that vendor was that got pwned and caused Target to get pwned. It was Fazio's Mechanical Services, if you don't know. But yeah.
Well, now you can't put it in the chat because Matt just told you what it is.
Well, but they put it in before. They clearly did.
They did not.
Points. I totally trust it.
Okay.
They did not. Fine. Okay, good. They do define the workforce. Workforce includes all individuals employed or engaged by an organization to have access to its information system. So in some way, workforce is equal users, right? Because they're saying it includes employees, contractors, anybody that has access, right? If you give a credential into your system for someone, they're in the workforce. Service providers are entities that offer platforms, software, and services to other enterprises. Examples include IT consultants, managed service providers, cloud service providers, third-party providers, right? So this is your service providers being better defined now. User accounts, right? Administrator accounts.
Big call out.
things that have
So
administrative
MSPs are
functions.
more and more on the map, right? They're showing up in legislature in some states. They're showing up in frameworks. There was, the whole, I don't know, we'll call it the great debacle, right? With CMMC and where MSPs fit on that spectrum.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
security protection
more
data,
and more noticed.
SPD, not STD. Yeah, exactly. But the point is like you're starting to understand that like there's a much broader need to understand all of these asset classes, and they took a whole guide that you should definitely read its entirety. It is a very good document to help people contextualize and understand what's a service account, what's a network. Hey, guess what? There are network infrastructures and network architecture as subsets. Infrastructure refers to all the resources that make network or internet connectivity. Communications possible includes hardware, software, systems, devices, but architecture is how it's designed, both physically and logically. So they're starting to be very granular. And that's what I will call, in my mind, 8.1 is granularity is what they've done. They've added a lot of granularity. You now have subsets of documentation. Documentation wasn't even defined. In fact, that's one of the asset class changes that happened in this is documentation includes policies, processes, procedures, plans, diagrams, other written material. Either physical or digital, which does get into security protection data. That's a class that's not called out specifically here, but it's definitely part of that. I don't have to beleaguer this, what a difference is a plan and a policy, but I do like this. This definition is so good. They literally call policy an official governance statement. This is the will of the company as we are writing it today. Just like we just got our new information security policies, right, Dom? And a lot of the things you were just doing on data and data security and data governance. This is the document for governance. So if anybody ever wonders, do I have governance? If you don't have policies, you don't have governance because you haven't written down and officially stated what you're going to be doing as an organization. And I teach a class with Sheldon Phillips about policy. And one of the things we talk about is policy is overarching. It's the guidelines, it's the governance, it's the road lines that we're going to try to target and hit. It's where we're building it and how we're building it. Processes are the actual general tasks that are involved to do something like my process for implementing a new user. That may spin off of my account management and identity policies that then create a process of how I manage identities that serves a function.
I teach a class on this for the security program, and the way I laid this out, and it's super ugly because I'm not a graphic artist, but it's a slide.
Same.
And there's a policy at the center of it, right? And off of that comes a process, right? And that process will lead to either a human or a robot that does a thing and creates a human. And then there's another connection back into the identity management policy, right? And then there's another connection back into the what did I call it? I think I called it a periodic audit policy or something like that. But the auditing process for making sure that our users that are there are supposed to be there. But you ultimately draw this whole picture of like the policy really drives everything you're going to do, right? The process is how you're going to do it.
Yeah. And your processes and procedures need to line up to and meet the policy, right? If you have a policy that says we're going to have 5-character passwords or 15-character passwords, then you need to make sure your process says ensure that this can only be 15 characters, right? You have to have something that drives that, a setting, a procedure that's done.
You know what's interesting? And we've run into this with a couple of companies, and this is very technical, but as things evolve, we'll pick on Windows Hello, and Windows Hello had the idea of the device pin that's bound to the device. And there was so much debate about, is that a password? In my opinion, it's not, right? It is a second factor, right? It's a pin. No something different than like a smart card pin, right? So that was really, so when you think about writing your policies and you think about that, if you're rolling out, I don't know, passkeys or FIDO keys, that pin is not a password. Thus, you need to write a policy for how the pin's managed, or that needs to be incorporated.
You might be a little bit frustrated that our pins are just like passwords. Is that what you're bringing up? I'm not poking at RS.
Oh, my Windows Hello pin drives me nuts.
It drives me nuts. It drives me nuts. It doesn't need to be 15 characters. It is a secondary factor to a very, very tight possession token. Anyways, I digress. Okay, we got to poke at RS team a little bit. I love you guys and girls. All right. So that's pretty much it for the asset class guide, right? And that asset class guide essentially breaks up each of these components. As you saw, workforce, service providers, user accounts, administrator accounts, service accounts, plans, policies, processes, procedures, network infrastructure, network architecture. So this one chart gets explained in its totality in the CIS 8.1 Guide to Assets. And I think it's just a really good read to get better contextualization and awareness of what we're talking about.
And you can use
right?
it with clients, like pull the graphics out of this, or use the document itself, but pull the information from this and use it with clients when you're discussing, like, what is an asset? That's a great question. It's all defined there, right? And it's not defined by you. This isn't you trying to come in and write the wording. This is something you can hand to your client and go over with them. So that's also, it's just a powerful asset in of itself.
Yeah, 100%.
It's a wrong choice of words. Powerful resource.
And it works. It's a powerful asset. We're good. I do like that in this guide, they give you pretty much all of this in one succinct place. Here's our security function changes, right? Well, what were those changes? These. And so you can get this and have this as a great guide to say, this one became govern, right? Establish and maintain a data management process. Establish and maintain a secure configuration process, went from protect to govern. That's a weird one, right? Like, that's a weird one. But if you go look at 4.1 in here, so I'll scroll my happy self down to 4.1, maybe slowly but surely. Almost there, boys and girls. Sorry, I suck. That's okay, I still like me. Okay, so 4.1. Jeez. All right, here we go. So if you look at the way
it's a big one. It's all about data.
True. But look how many items feed into this 4.1, right? Establish and maintain a secure configuration process. We named this as a process-oriented safeguard. So this is another one where the working group has turned this into govern function. And basically it's saying that if govern, then policy. If policy, then process and procedure. And I agree with this, right? Like we just said, policy is akin to governance because it is the written form of us defining governance. But then the policy is going to get influenced. And here's a great example of why. When we talk about 4.1 says, hey, configure your assets, pretty much. It says, hey, configure your assets. Have an asset management, asset configuration process, secure management, and secure configuration process. But if I was writing that process or the policy that governed it and saying, okay, well, I've done it securely. Matt goes in and reads a checklist and he sets up the computer. We're good. But it doesn't have any of these other things like 1.5, use a passive asset discovery tool. Why does that matter? Because I have to set up some policy to make sure that I'm doing that and some process and procedure to do that. Same thing with using, let's get into some of the others, like implement and manage a firewall and servers. Somewhere in my process and procedures, when it says equal server as an asset class, I need to have equal some way to set up firewall, right? And that all comes back into that configuration process that from cradle to grave, you can show that these things were placed on those assets that contain sensitive information. Right? That's kind of the whole point here. So this is a very good validation of the gaps, in my opinion, of CIS 8.0, of not having them defined as really process and procedure based. Like, what's a tool that's going to help me with secure configuration? Well, Intune would, but that's not actually how you meet the process, or that's not actually how you meet the policy. The policy is, here's the things that I'm going to do and configure. One of those tools and technologies might be Intune, and the way I might execute it. So this really does, in my mind, set this understanding that everywhere you see govern, you need to make sure you have policy for those things, right? And maybe somebody can talk me off a ledge on that one, but I believe you're going to have some form of policy in an SSP or a system security plan, or in WISP, if you want to go written information security plan, that will speak towards how I configure my assets. That needs to be a secure configuration policy that goes into place. And so maybe one of the pieces we can take away from this today is, if you see the word govern, you probably are going to need a policy. Let's see if I can break that apart here. We have secure configuration. Yeah, it checks out. Yep, secure configuration. You know why 4.1 and 4.2 are separate? Just for anybody wanting a weird nugget. When I asked this, I said, how is 4.1 inclusive of every other asset class but network config? And 4.2 is only network config. And if you haven't noticed that before, that is true. That is the way this is laid out. 4.1 covers everything but network. Right. And Josh looked at me, and I don't want to misquote him, but the words were basically, the NSA had a real hard-on for network management and network configuration vulnerabilities, so they asked us to make it separate. Now, a little tongue-in-cheek, but I get it. I totally follow. Anyways, they went from respond to protect, right? Automatic device lockout, that's not a response. That is a protect. That was definitely a miss in the original one, right? Yeah, it's me making it set up so that it will lock, not respond to an actor. Same thing with disabled dormant accounts. That's not a respond. It's definitely a protect. That is absolutely a miss, and I agree with that change. The rest of them are mostly governance in this space. You've got a deploy and maintain anti-malware software went from protect to detect, which is interesting, right? Because we've made a shift in this decision that I'm not actually stopping this. I might stop some of it. What is the key value of an EDR, Dom? What in your mind? What's the key value of an EDR? Is it because it's always going to stop the threat?
What's in the name? It's detection, right? Like that's its sole purpose in life is to detect and respond, and it can't do all that by itself. Not in today's threat landscape.
100%. In my mind, the EDR is collecting that data that both helps me detect, but also helps me understand what happened if I'm in another form of detection, right? So I agree with that one completely. Right. Data recovery process, again, it's process function, so it's going to be a governed. Data architecture diagrams, those are becoming governed. I don't know if I agree, but I'll take it. I think it probably would borderline on identify for me. But govern does say, if I've said I'm going to use these standards, then this visual must match that.
Because if you're using asset tools, that identifies, and then piecing it together and documenting, I could see, is it, because the asset type's documentation on that one, right?
Yeah, you're probably right. Let's look. Yes, it is documentation, so 100%. And there is an interesting corollary, right? Most of these governs do seem to be either users or documentation, which is interesting. And I also, I don't know. I don't know.
I think that needs another safeguard. I think that needs to, there needs to be an establish and maintain a process or procedure to centralize account management, and then centralize account management.
Because the centralization in my mind is at the very least detection, but it's probably protection too. And I'll make an argument for that, right? Because, and CIS, if y'all are listening, I'm sorry, I'm fighting you on this one, but I am. I really think centralizing account management is an aid and function in either protection, in the sense that I now have the ability to apply protections, which is probably not the best fit. But in my mind, the best fit is probably in detection or identification at maybe an outlier. But detection is saying, if I put everything in one place and I centralize those accounts to one single identity, I can have a better broad contextual understanding of all the places that user is going to, and I have a better application of WEBA, right, or user analytics and user behavior analytics, which allows me to do some better detection. So I'd probably fight this one a little bit. I don't know that I agree with it being governed. What are y'all's thoughts in the chat? And if you don't care, just don't comment. It's okay. I'm a nerd. I can take it. Okay, so govern. We get into, what else do we have? We have protect to detect on anti-malware software. I agree with that one. Have we tackled all these? Identify from protect. Establish, maintain. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly on this one, right? Switching from protect to identify for third-party software components. Protect to govern on severity rating. Sure, I'll take that. Protect on application pen testing, going to govern. I guess because you're measuring what you expect. You're testing your controls. It is a testing methodology.
Yeah, I guess. Well, it's not protective.
I'll take it.
It's not.
Yeah, it's not protective. Yeah, it's
that's interesting.
It's probably right. It's probably correct in governance. Governance by me finding a pen test that says, "Hey, LLM&R poisoning is still possible because you're still using IPv6." But I thought your secure configuration process in 4.1 said don't use IPv6, right? I thought you set that in there, so I can see that playing out. What about respond to govern?
Not using IPv6 is a great policy, by the way.
It's a fantastic policy.
I'm
but what if we run out of IPv4 addresses? I digress. Let's see. Govern to identify to detect. What? Wait. Wait. What about congruity, boys and girls? I thought we just said it was govern. In application pen testing. I guess that's because you own the application that you're pen testing and you're writing it by that definition in Control 16. Maybe that's their delineation, but
that
it
is
an interesting
16,
delineation. Yeah, because these are focused on network design, network controls, network measurement. But even then, I would probably still put it in governance if I put the other one in governance. I don't know that would be delineable. The only argument someone might be able to make is that application development has set application guidelines one shouldn't extend beyond, and the pen testing is a measurement of that governance.
But your network configuration should have set guidelines that one should not violate. So.
Agreed. I believe this is wrong. I think these two should at the very least probably shift out to govern, or the holistic pen testing needs to be all detect, one of the two, but I don't think it's detect. So, all right, didn't mean to get in an arguing match, and we've got a bunch left to cover, and probably we're pretty much out of time, Dom, I would wager, for the day, or do we still have a few minutes? I think
we're a minute and a half over this segment. Yeah, we got a couple minutes.
Yeah, we'll get over it.
We'll delay the play of the day a little bit.
Yeah, I think we can work through that. Asset class methodology, we've already covered. Asset class changes, we've already covered. I will say that some of them were just nomenclatural, right? Like if you look at applications shifting to software, just nomenclatural delineations just to match up with NIST, CSF in the same wording. Applications, anything else stand out? Devices to data, right? Like interesting, huh? I agree with that wholeheartedly. That's a good move. This is another one of those good move scenarios. Basically, the
Think about
encrypt data on end user devices.
Yeah, well, and I've actually explained this to customers in the past. I don't give a damn about your laptop, right? If you really want, if you're really worried about the cost of that laptop
Pets and
when it gets
cattle.
stolen at a Starbucks, file an insurance claim, right? But I really care about the data on that laptop, right? So
100%.
I'm encrypting it, right? This isn't really a conversation or a question. I'm just letting you know the policy's coming out, right?
Yeah, and it was device context before of saying the device should be encrypted, but no, I actually don't
It's
care.
not
You
the
don't have to
device
encrypt
context,
the whole
yeah.
device. I do not
Just the
care. I
data.
only care that you encrypt the sensitive data and the data that I care about it being exposed. If it's public data, I don't even care. Don't encrypt it. Don't care. It's easier usually just to set a overall
By the way,
device encryption.
yeah, I was gonna say we're not
context.
advocating for granular encryption because that's real hard to manage. But the point stands.
Yeah, it's true.
All about the data.
It's true. Yeah, there's still an argument that encrypting the whole device gives you a overarching protection. What's beneficial though about a specific encryption policy is it's typically executed in a way that no matter where that data is, it is still encrypted and must rely upon some cloud service to disencrypt it, like AIP or things of that nature. Whereas end user device encryption, if I'm on that device, I have the data and I can exfil it, right? And it's not encrypted anymore. And so there is an argument for granular, but yeah, just differences there. Let's see, applications to documentation. So that's fair. Secure configuration process, I agree. Network to documentation. Let's see, users to devices. Yeah, that's fair. I'll take that. Like, I want to lock the session of the device. The user's a byproduct of that.
Ryan Hubbard came in the chat and he said the pen testing program definition is governance, not the actual pen testing activity. That's an interesting thing.
Okay, so let's take that back to his to this statement we're talking about here. So he says the pen testing program definition is governance. Agreed. Like 18.1 should be governance, and it is, in fact, right? To your point. But his argument is that the pen testing activity is not, and I do respect me some Brian Hubbard. So in his mind, you're detecting what though? Detection is typically threats. Detection is typically an actual active attack. Detection is not usually detecting you failing in your own implementations.
I can make a case for identify and that you, I mean, because you identify risk, right? So you could identify new risk, although that's less in the framework conversation, more the poem conversation.
No, I'm with you. I'm actually completely with you on that, Dom. I will give you Matt points on that one. I feel like this should shift to identify, and the understanding in I'm identifying the things that I'm failing at in my security controls, right? When you talk about 18.2 being external and internal in 18.5, you're looking for those failures in your controls in that governance, but that governance is the failure in governance of those other controls that are respective. I'm torn here, y'all. I could be all over the place on this because I could put it in govern and probably be okay with it. I can put it
well,
in
we're just gonna have to have CIS on the show, and we can duke it out.
Yeah, let's just get Charity in here to just duke it out. Her and Josh, that'd be awesome. I'm in. All right, let's wrap this up. I guess we'll get to our TLDR and we'll do our play of the game and play of the day today. We'll talk about what we actually discovered today. Okay, 60 seconds. I'm not going to waste it. I believe the point is you should follow iterative control updates because it's the one time that CIS gets to say, we made a mistake and we'd like to fix it. It's also going to give you as a practitioner more context, more awareness, more ability to understand the things that are around you and you're trying to implement. And how do they do that? By people failing to understand it and needs to update that, needs to clarify. So TLDR, it is that you are starting to see safeguards mirror each other in the United States. NIST CSF is a perfect piece that ties in to CIS and the controls that are there. So my point is, never more should you be in a framework. You should be dealing with these things and you should start understanding those changes. And to Dom's point earlier, I think he made the best point. You can use these with your clients. If you're trying to explain why you're doing something and perhaps adding lookout to your mobile protection or an EDR, you can say why. So use this for your advantage.